This is the Living in Clarity podcast. My name is Brandon Fisher. This is Coach Ratner.
Today we interviewed Jodi Samuels, author of Chutzpah, Wisdom, and Wine, The Journey of an Unstoppable Woman. Let me tell you something. This woman is unstoppable.
Yeah, she is a real hero.
I mean, she has a child with Down syndrome and continues to live her life and just advocates for her daughter like nobody else, travels the world. She's really quite a story.
You're going to really learn a lot from this episode.
Enjoy it.
Welcome to this episode of the Living in Clarity podcast. My name is Brandon Fisher. This is Coach Ratner. And today we are joined by Jodi Samuels. Jodi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Very exciting to have you.
There's so much to talk about. I don't even know where to start, but I think the best place is just to talk about who you are and what brought you to Israel, to where you are right now.
Whoa, that's a long journey. So I'm someone that my children would probably describe as that crazy woman. My children think I'm really crazy, but I'm really this person who wakes up each day in my life, and I think I've been this way since I was in high school, that I really just truly want to do something. I want to make a difference in the world. While my other friends were partying, I was like plotting the next move, how to make a impact in the world. And I really truly wake up in the morning, whether it's in my role as a disability advocate for my daughter, or if it's in the role of community building and trying to help young professional Jews connect to their Jewish heritage, help them find love, or to help them find meaning, their why, or if it's in my business life where I'm helping clients through my consulting to figure out how they can actually, because everybody wants to make money and everybody wants to grow, but they're not always sure how to make that happen. So for me, it's like a mission to, in my own way, impact the world every single day.
Wow, you must be busy.
Yeah.
So I met you
I
through
try.
I met you through JIC, which
Correct.
is Jewish International Connection, right? So tell us about that.
So Jewish International Connection is like a Jewish home away from home. When my husband and I moved to New York in 2000, someone who knew, we'd always been involved with hosting young professional singles, and he was doing his MBA at Columbia University. And he called me and he said, it's Rosh Hashanah coming up and all these foreign students have nowhere to go for Rosh Hashanah. And I landed up hosting 36 people from 30 countries.
Wow.
And I'd been in New York 3 weeks. And I had an epiphany in that moment that people who move to the city, like a new place, just need a Jewish home away from home. They need a place to connect to their Judaism. And I saw that even people who came from like more traditional homes, when they got to the big city, New York's the place where like everything glitters and everything's possible. And sometimes they just forget to do their Jewish part of life. And if you ask people, why did they come to New York? They'll tell you either for a job or to meet someone, except they get caught up in everything that New York offers and not Jewish life.
They get lost.
They get lost in glitz and glamour, everything that life offers, and the Jewish thing just falls. And they don't. So we realized we needed to create a model of relevant Jewish life for these people, accessible, and something where we truly understood how foreigners, because foreigners have like a different experience of their Judaism. When you live in a small town somewhere, you might have gone to shul twice a year, except that was to the Chabad shul or the Orthodox shul. There wasn't other options. So even though you're not Chabad or you're not Orthodox, or your access to Jewish life was through an Orthodox filter, and then you came to the US and you were like, well, I don't fit in anywhere. And we tried to create a place where people could fit in Jewishly, where it wasn't threatening, where everybody was welcome. It was like, and then at the same time, having the shared common thing of being new to a city. Americans would be like, but I don't understand. Why can't I come? And I'd be like, well, you have to immigrate and you have to go through, the whole process and leave your family and be. So now over the years, we're not only reaching internationals, we reach people, both Americans and internationals, but we're in 4 cities. We're in New York, in Miami, in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem. We have about 10,000 people a year come through our programs. And our programs include Torah classes, dating programs, like what you helped run for us. We do social events, Shabbat programs, but all of our programs are about creating meaningful connections, helping people create community, and helping them to well, we call it continuity, but continuity comes with really understanding what it means to be Jewish.
Sounds like you empower the participants to create their own communities. How does that work?
Right. So we're not a community, like we're not a shul, we're not a, like, but what we do is we try and give people access to Jewish life. We work with many different partners in the community. We try and onboard them into the community. One of the most important things is to create friendships and marriages, but not just, we've had 139 couples get married that we know of.
How many?
139
Because of your
events.
That's a lot, Brandon.
Yeah, that's incredible.
I mean, that's really crazy.
So, and we really work very hard at making sure all our programming connects the dots for people that they don't sometimes get in all this other programming to get people to meet. It's about creating quality forums that they can meet. It's about dating workshops and programs to support them, because the people if they haven't had good role models, or they are broken inside, or they've been burnt from past relationships, we need to help them to see the other reality. But we also create a lot of boutique quality programs where people actually meet and talk. Do something like very unusual, like actually have a real conversation. Yeah. And we build in a lot of experiences into our programs, because we find that once people get older, they get so burnt out and they're so tired of the dating scene that the last thing they want to do. So we feel that if every event is an experience, people will come for the experience. So an example, a cooking class, but it's only 25 people. All our events are curated. So you can't come to an event and just sign up and there's like random who's there. It will be equal guys, it'll be equal girls. We know that they're like similar age range. And then you come and you go participate in a cooking class. And then you sit down afterwards, have a meal together, drink a glass of wine. So you feel like even if you didn't meet anyone, you had an experience. And I say, I wish I could be as I've made so many best friends. I wish we had as many shidduchim as we've made, like roommates and best friends and business connections.
So before I want to come into my mind right now, if someone's watching this in New York or Tel Aviv or Miami or Jerusalem, how do they find your events?
So Jewish International Connection New York, JICNY, on our website, or JIC New York on Facebook, JIC Israel. Or you can just Google Jodi Samuels or Jewish International.
Well, how do you run events in 4 different cities? You're here in Jerusalem. You're not 4 people. How do you do that?
I've tried to be 4 people.
Yeah.
This is the part that I'm most proud of. Like, we are very much a volunteer-led organization. I have one person who works for me. I think you met Stacy.
Yes, I've talked
and
to
she
her.
works about 70% of a work week. Right. And the rest is run by volunteers, about people who really, really care about the mission. Like, I was running another program this Shabbat. We had a program running in Jerusalem. An example would be we set up 50 people to go to different families. Each family was curated, 4 guys, 4 girls. They have a meal with the family, l'chaims, quality, and then everybody meets for dessert afterwards. So you can't have FOMO, like fear of missing out.
Right.
And I wasn't there. Like, that's just families who hosted the whole thing for me.
Did you go to the after dessert?
I wasn't even in Jerusalem.
Oh, so who were in the program?
So I had a volunteer, like one of my board members was there,
right.
And he ran the dessert. Each of the families are screened and they ran the program, and Stacy organized all the logistics.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
See, so, Brandon has also run events all over the world. Kind of, right?
Yeah.
You can learn something from
I'm definitely learning already. And that leads me to my next question, so I can learn a little bit. Unless you were leading up to a question.
No, go ahead.
Since I fully believe that one experience can change somebody's entire trajectory of their life. Much more than they can go to a lot of classes and they'll learn the information, but when they experience it, it can change their whole understanding of what's possible and who they are. So my question really is there a key to what you like to include in an experience that you cultivate?
I think that people need to feel comfortable with who they are. And I think we spend so much time trying to be what our echo chamber wants, what we think our mother wants, what Facebook thinks we should have. And I joke about it, but it's actually not a joke. I think that organizations don't serve enough good red wine at events.
Really?
And I really am on this mission that I think that no, I'm being serious.
Yeah.
When people have a drink, they take down the chill factor. The chill factor sets in. Instead of like, not my look, not my scene. Do I look okay? Is he judging me? Who am I going to sit with? We always, it just breaks the ice. And it's amazing to see people talk and people like chill
Open up.
with people who aren't like, on paper, wouldn't have been the person they would have looked at. They wouldn't have been the person they would have chosen to sit next to. And then the second thing we do is we make sure people connect. And even though they're like all argue and go like, oh, we don't want to do l'chaim. So all our programs have touch points where people connect and meet. Whether it's a Shabbat dinner where you rotate, like the women sit seated and the men rotate each course, so you get to meet new people.
Oh, that's a great idea. It's like speed eating.
Except at your Shabbat meal.
That's cool. So you make people change seats during the meal.
Or we'll have people make l'chaims and get to meet everyone. Or everything we do is calculated how to maximize the touch points to have meaningful conversation in a relaxed environment.
Are there any rules about topics that are not discussed or
Politics.
Politics.
That's great. We're leaving politics
we do the
out.
same thing at our table too.
Politics.
People start bringing politics. I said we don't talk politics.
Yeah.
There's nothing good's going to come out of it.
I don't mind if people ask questions about religion and things, because I think that's, it can be a growing question, but politics is just divisive. There is not US politics, not Israeli politics.
Yeah.
There is,
Nowhere else.
And COVID vaccines.
COVID vaccines.
Yeah.
Those are the two things that you can't discuss
Right.
at the table.
Whoa.
So how did you come to write this book?
I'd been writing a blog for a really long time that was very popular called Metro Ima. And people kept saying to me, Jodi, you lead such a crazy life. Like, we travel all over the world.
How many countries was it?
We've been to 89 countries. My kids have been to over 50 countries, many of them multiple times. So we travel all over, and we travel kosher Shomer Shabbat on a budget. Every single Shabbat at the Samuels house is like 50 people at least for a meal. We host a lot of people from all around the world doing hasbara, like Israel, I guess, outreach PR, and they're not always Jewish groups. So we host these crazy groups. So we could have Chinese businessmen one week, Swedish pastors, and then, as my kids will say, the Jews looking to get married. And then we always on the go. My husband and I have been married 29 years, and we go out every single night. We really believe in working hard and playing hard. Plus, I run all my events with the community. So people always said, Jodi, you should write a book. And I had it in my to-do list from the time I moved to Israel. When I made Aliyah, I had Monday and Wednesdays. It was my time to write a book. And I just didn't do it. And then COVID came. And I just sat down and I wrote the book.
Amazing. So tell us about what's the book about.
The book is part memoir, like my personal journey. But it's a story about everybody in life is given a deck of cards in life. We're all dealt a hand, whether you want it or not, and how to come up on top, how to use humor, and how to make the most out of your life and you to be the winner. And the formula to that is the name, chutzpah, wisdom, and wine.
Right.
The name says it all.
So what's your favorite grape?
Malbec.
Malbec's it's a grape. It's not a blend, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like every blend I have of wine. They all taste good. Like, when they have Shiraz, Malbec, mixed with, they're delicious.
Well, we're also lucky we live in Israel with lots of good wine.
I know.
And we've come of a time where like kosher wine actually tastes good, not like it used to. So
they've gotten very, very good with the processes of.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So even it's like today, even the cheap cars are great cars. Although cheap wines are great wines.
Yeah, the wines are incredible.
Yeah.
So why not a sweet wine? Or is there a time for a sweet wine?
Never.
No, that's
Never.
not wine. That's like candy.
Sweet wine is for
kids.
Yeah, your kids love it.
Right.
Kids at a Pesach Seder.
Right.
So what I do Pesach Seder is I the first glass I have, we have 4 cups of wine on Passover. The first one's all wine. The second one's half wine, half grape juice. And the third one's all grape juice. And the fourth one's like half wine, half grape juice.
I can be awful.
I can't do it. I can't do it all. So
your seders are really fun.
My favorites are red. Correct. They're a lot of fun. So let's tell us about your daughter.
So we were living in New York City, and we moved there in 2000, and here comes 2008, and we're living like a perfect life. We've got the open home. We are always hosting people. Like, our door literally was like open. Like, it was always ajar. My father would always be, you live in New York City, don't leave your door open. And people would be in and out. We were like, the couple that everybody wanted to be like. In fact, like, just to give you an idea, like one open home we had, my doorman, after about 4 years of observing all the people come in and out and all the, groceries and packages, is like, I know what you do. You run a soup kitchen for Jewish people.
Yeah.
So, like, we really were this family. We're living this good life. My husband and I have great jobs. And if you would have asked all the singles to come to our house, they'd be like, when we grow up, we want to be just like the Samuels. We had 2 adorable children. 2008, February 25th, 2008, the doctor walked in after my baby was born and said, Mrs. Samuels, did you do genetic testing? And those were the words that changed my life. So...
What a time to hear those words, right?
Yeah. I mean, I sat bolt upright, and I had actually had a mother's intuition that something was wrong. I remember I was actually sitting in a class, and I remember this like overwhelming feeling that something was wrong. And I came home and I told my husband, who's a doctor, and my husband is like, if it's not in a double-blind study and published in a medical journal with pure evidence, then it doesn't exist. And he's like, there's no reason, none of your tests, nothing shows anything. I made him come with me to the OBGYN. I was crying. She's like, there's no reason to be perturbed. Everything's fine. And I just had this like overwhelming mother's intuition. And when they were prepping me for a cesarean, I was like, please God, let me be strong enough to deal with what comes my way. I wasn't like, please God, give me a healthy baby. I just had this feeling. And then my daughter was born and everything was fine. And we sent, at the time, we had 8,000 people on our email list. We sent a message, mom and baby doing well. And then the doctor walked in on her 3rd day of her life and he raised his suspicion. And I actually knew immediately that he was going to say Down syndrome. And I actually have a first cousin who has Down syndrome. And she was born in 1970. And in those days in South Africa, they counseled you just to put, your child straight into an institution. And my family had like a lot, like extended family. There was a lot of trauma about my cousin, and we only saw her a few times a year. And I was one of these people who literally, I couldn't even look at people with a disability. Like the synagogue I went to was right next to the Jewish home for the disabled. And when these people would come with like Down syndrome and that, I couldn't actually look at them. It was like hard for me to look at them. And now everything about my cousin flashed before me. I knew what Down syndrome was. I didn't have to be educated. My husband's a doctor. He didn't. And I just had absolute fear and absolute terror. And I was like, how am I going to be this hostess extraordinaire? At this point, I'd been to 40 countries. I was like, I still want to travel the world. I'm like this aspiring entrepreneur. I haven't yet made it to front page of Fortune and Forbes and Business Week. And I was like, what does this mean for my children as siblings of a child with a disability? What does it mean for my marriage? And I went into the restroom. It was like the only place I could be alone. And I looked in the mirror and, I'd had 2 miscarriages between my middle daughter and Kayla. And for whatever reason, I just felt God wanted me to have this child. Like I felt this neshama, this soul was meant to be part of our lives. And I also felt like if my door, and that's why I told you the story, like my door was literally open. I was like, if we have an open door for everyone, the lost, the lonely, the searching, the looking to get married, the new to New York, it didn't matter who you were. Yeah, we weren't like truly able to welcome our own child. And my life's a lie. And I remember the words of Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, and he said, we begin to achieve greatness when we pass our values on to the next generation. And I walked out and I said to my husband, I don't want us to be a victim. I want us to, in this story, and we're going to control the narrative. And thank God he was on the same page, because that's not always the case. Sometimes couples who have like a child with a disability can be very jarring to the relationship. And, this was the beginning. We sent out another message to 8,000 people, and we decided we were going to control the narrative. And we realized that we had like an opportunity, like we have all these thousands of people that we can influence and we have a relationship with. Why can't we change a knee-jerk reaction to a situation? So we sent out a message to 8,000 people and we said, we found out that our princess has challenges, but she's still our princess. And we decided to set the tone before we walked out of the hospital, how, we were going to handle this.
So looking back, if you look back at that day, that minute that the doctor asked you about genetic testing, would that have made any difference?
If I would have done testing? Yeah. I'm actually grateful that I didn't, because I actually had 3 days to bond with my daughter without, just seeing her like a baby and not having all the stress of oh my God, but what if this? And as soon as the genetic counselors started coming in, they gave you a book in the hospital. There's a series of books called What to Expect When You're Expecting. And a lot of women read it, and it gives you all the milestones. And then it's what to expect when you have a child with Down syndrome. And I remember reading this book and saying to Gavin, did we just give birth to a monster? Because everything in this book was every possible thing that could go wrong. And I'm so glad that I didn't spend 9 months or 6 months or whatever thinking about everything that could go wrong. How was I going to cope with it? I bonded with her. And they say you're only as strong as the challenge that comes your way. And in that moment, we dealt with it in the way that we knew best. So I'm glad I didn't know, but also thank God she didn't have any health defects that sometimes if you know in advance, you can address them. Especially heart issues and things with Down syndrome are very problematic. So if you know in utero, sometimes they can even do intervention in utero or as the child's born. Thank God she was fine, and that's why they didn't find out until her 3rd day.
Wow.
What advice do you have for parents who have kids with Down syndrome as well? And how has the journey been since finding out? What's it been like?
Look, there's no one journey, just like there's no one child. I think the most important thing, and it's not just Down syndrome, I think it's with any disability.
Right.
When I was reading that book and it was what to expect, and it was oh my God, a friend of mine said to me, Jodi, she's a baby first. Okay, she's your child first, and then she's a diagnosis. You don't go and say, I have a cancerous child. I have a child with cancer. I have a child with autism. I have a child with behavioral issues. I have a child with chutzpah, but that doesn't define your entire. And I'm so grateful for that one. And I think that defines the most important thing, because she's an individual. She is someone that we can love. She gives love. She's an amazing human being. I mean, she's now 14 and she's defied everybody's expectations of what, she goes to regular school.
Really? Wow.
She's in high school. She's in 8th grade in Israel. She goes to a regular school. She catches a bus on her own. She went to 4-week sleepaway camp with regular kids. She is very capable and very able. And if I would have used either that book or what society's expectations are of her, I don't know where she would have been. But we never ever, we just treated her from the day she was born. We got brilliant advice from Professor Feuerstein, who ran, he's passed away, but he was one of the leaders in inclusion in Israel. And he said, there's active acceptance and passive acceptance. Passive acceptance is oh, God gave me a special needs child, and this is just the situation, and I'll do the best for the child. Active acceptance is when you say, I love you, but I won't accept you as you are. Meaning, I will always set goals for you. I will always help you to achieve, but never be disappointed if you don't reach it. We always expect our typical kids to be come on, we're Jewish parents, 110% of their potential. So why don't we expect 110% of Kayla's potential without being disappointed if she doesn't achieve it? And that's the challenge. So I would tell parents that don't let your child be boxed in by a diagnosis. A diagnosis is just a title. And I mean, Kayla's defied everyone. Not all kids are as high functioning, but every kid brings something to the table, and they are not Down syndrome. They are a child who has challenges that Down syndrome, force it to manifest. It's helpful to have a diagnosis. It gives you the ability to get therapies and services, but she is not Down syndrome. She's Kayla.
Wow. That's an amazing story. So how, I know we mentioned, they give you this booklet, Down syndrome they always give you the worst possible scenario. It's just I'm sure, I don't take aspirin. If you read aspirin and look at the side effects, it's probably horrible bowel movements and like two noses and like, or like, all these drugs have horrible side effects. Most of them are very, very rare, So tell us about that amazing story. Do you talk about that in your book?
Yeah. So my book is a lot about, my book is like Jodi real and honest. It's Jodi unfiltered. So I talk about from the challenges to the feelings, not just with Caleb, but with Aliyah, with working in the community, with everything I do. It's like an unfiltered approach. But yeah, there is a lot that I do talk about. Unfortunately, we had, I never realized when we walked out of the hospital, they check your wristband to make sure you're not stealing the baby. And my husband joked they should just put brand activist on our forehead. And he didn't realize how prophetic those words would be when just the next day, when Kelly was 4 days old, and we came home and a neighbor came to visit. And a religious neighbor, like she came to visit, and she's like, I can't say this in a New York accent, no matter how long I lived there, but she's like, what? You didn't do an amniocentesis and abort? And I'm like holding the baby. I'm like, no, guess not. I didn't abort. But soon we didn't realize that like in a place like New York City, in a liberal democratic city that's open to everything and everyone, that we would be constantly defending our daughter's right to exist. Wow. And that was in day 4. When Kayla was 2, we wanted to send her to a Jewish day school. Okay, New York City, one of the wealthiest like zip codes, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the world. We wanted to send her to a Jewish day school that her siblings went to. And we were told no. We were locked out. We were told, your school isn't right for us. And I was like just so devastated because as like Balchuva, we had like rejected our parents' values and chosen our own paths in life. And now, like, especially in America, more so than in Israel, your school and your shul and everything's like connected. And I felt I was locked out, absolutely locked out of society, locked out of my community. And I really went into like a crisis about my Judaism and my choices. I was like, how can this be my community that my daughter's locked out? My husband always used to joke, Jodi, don't judge Jews. Don't judge Judaism, but the Jews.
Right.
It was like,
it's the same thing also.
And it was a very, very tough time for me to come to terms. But one of the things I realized, and this is what made me into an activist, people would say the most stupid things to us all the time. Gavin wanted to have a T-shirt. My husband, Gavin, wanted to have a T-shirt made for Kayla that said, like, I am extra copy of chromosome 21 that accounts for my mental retardation. What's your excuse? Because, like, people would say the most stupid things, but we realized that people in our own world didn't even understand the challenges we were going through for inclusion, the kind of comments people made. So I started running these community forums. And I had like my own personal metamorphosis because I was actually really, really shy. And I never used to speak in public. And if I had to speak in public, my lips would quiver and my eyes would water. And I decided to run these community forums. And I didn't even realize it would be like such a big forum. I put out this there and I had like emails from my database and the school. Well, taking a step back, we had tried to like approach the school. We said no. We then went to the board and I was like so frustrated because the two board presidents had their daughters who were doing chesed projects. 6th grade kids get to do a chesed project. I hate chesed. I don't hate chesed what it's meant to be. I hate kindness when we teach our kids. You go for 1 hour a week. You play with the Down syndrome kid. Tick. You host someone in your home. Tick. You write a check. Tick. But what about like opening your hearts, opening your homes, opening your schools, opening your sports clubs? I realized people didn't even understand this was a challenge. And when they told us no at the school, we said, we're not asking you to do what's easy. We're asking you to do what's right. But we saw that we were locked out. And the more I spoke to other parents, the more I saw other people were locked out. So we started planned this community forum. And there's nothing more than the media love than a story of Orthodox Jews and something, in the media. Next thing, I arrive at my event and there's all the media vans.
Oh, wow.
Like every, in New York City, they all come with their lights flashing in their van.
Where was the event?
It was at Spanish Portuguese synagogue in New York City.
Oh.
And about 200 people showed up. And afterwards, they came and they said, so can we interview you? And I said to my husband, you talk. And he's like, hell no, you wanted to do this, you talk. And I actually say, I had to find my voice. Part of was finding my voice, because I realized if somebody was going to advocate for my daughter, it was me. If I didn't like what I see, it was going to be me who was going to have to change that. I couldn't just sit there and wait and Google and hope, I don't know, some information would pop in my... I had to be the person who was going to make the change for her. I was going to have to create her reality. And I started becoming a very outspoken disability activist from that day onwards.
That is an unbelievable story.
You've really been in charge of the narrative since day 3, day 1, specifically day 3.
In fact, now, I actually have the challenge that I have to take a step back. She's a teenager, and kids learn the most from learning from their mistakes, not from being told what to do. And I have to transition from being Mama Grizzly always on to letting her find her own way. It's challenging for me because I'm always so tabe and so on and so.
So it's time for her to write her own narrative.
Totally. And that's my personal struggle
That's
right now.
Big challenge.
Did she came to the school or not?
No. You know what? In the end, we were actually we hired a disability lawyer who's now a Supreme Court judge in Michigan, Richard Bernstein.
Wow.
And it was really a horrible time in the community. It was really very awful. I remember being I'd go to the supermarket and people would be like, why are you doing this? What do you think your other children will think of you? And I'd be like, my other children will always think that I'm going to go into bat for them and stand in the side of right. We even had an anonymous death threat. It was quite insane what went on. We had our not-for-profit defunded. It's all in the book. You need to have a big glass of wine.
My wife read the book. We have it in the library, actually.
You need a big glass of wine.
Before we met.
Wow.
To read the story, but of what happened to us. But we were truly locked out because my daughter wasn't Harvard perfect, so please don't apply. And it was really ugly. And we brought in this disability activist and disability lawyer, and we could have taken it to the next step. But sometimes you realize that the fight isn't just about us. And Miran, who's Kayla's brother, is 6 years older. At the time, he was 8. And he came to me and he said, Ima, every time I see Rabbi X, he's like, I want to ask him about the Kayla situation. But he's like, but I'm embarrassed. And I thought, this isn't an 8-year-old's battle. This isn't a battle for an 8-year-old. And I did a final appeal to the school. And I sent a letter. The school made one of those boo-boos, when they send an email to the whole school list without blind carbon coughing.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So I had the whole school list.
Yeah.
And I had all my JIC lists. And I had all the people who'd been coming to my community forums emails. And I decided to send, this was my final plea to the school. And I sent a letter to the rabbi. And I said, dear rabbi, I said, we full fee paying parents. We hands-on people. Ask anyone in the community. We doers. What we're asking for is what's in your 2-year-old program. What's a 2-year-old program? We're not asking for guaranteed entry into Harvard. We're not even asking for first grade. We're asking for 2-year-old,
Right.
where you learn
Preschool.
communication and socialization skills. We're asking that you can come to the same school as your siblings. And, so I said, but Rami, I'm not even asking you to consider this for Kayla. I said, I'm asking you to consider this for Miran. And I told him a story. So New York City, you always have a beggar on your street corner. Those who didn't know we had a beggar on your street corner after COVID, now everybody knows about the beggars in New York. So we had a beggar on our street corner, Diane. And Diane was she's there for years and years. And she knew all the Orthodox Jews that on Shabbat you ask on a Friday for $2, on a 3-day Yontif you ask for $3, on Hanukkah you ask for Hanukkah money, and on Christmas you ask for Christmas money. And one day my husband gave Diane $10. And Miran said, but why did you give her $10 and not $1 today? And Gavin said, well, when it's really freezing cold, the police sometimes pick up the homeless people and force them to go to shelters. So he said, but there's some supers in the buildings, we'll let them sleep in the basement, but they have to pay them off. So she asked Gavin for money. And he said, Abba, he said, next time, the kid's 8, and he says, Abba, next time, you don't have to give her money. She can sleep in my bed.
Wow.
And then he said, but don't tell Ema. So Gavin was like, why not tell Ema? He thought he was going to say, like, Ema's going to say she's dirty or whatever. She always would drop presents for my kids, like fluffy toys from Salvation Army or something.
She did.
She went, like how we do, like if the doorman would call up and go, Mrs. Samuels, Diane dropped something for you. And I had to like put it straight in the, the garbage chute. So Gavin said, why not tell Ema? And he said, because Ema will tell everyone that I'm a mitzvah boy and I'm so wonderful. And he's like, it's just what Jews do. And I said, Rabbi, I'm asking you to reconsider, because this little boy one day is going to wake up and say, where was my community? Where was my school? Where was my values? And I said, that's why I'm asking you. But the answer was still no.
Okay.
So I decided to move. Like, I could have fought and I probably could have won. But was this really where I wanted my kids to be educated? Is this really, I didn't think it was fair. Like, even though I thought it was such an important battle, that it's not a battle that an 8-year-old has to fight.
Right.
Wow.
And when I went to another school and I walked in there and I walked into the school, so I actually went to a Chabad school, preschool, which was on the street we lived in. We just never went to Chabad. And I walked in and the principal said, oh, I see on your intake form you have 2 older kids. You never sent your kids to our school. Why are you choosing our school? And my lips started quivering and my eyes filled with tears. And I was like, because I don't like her at the other school. And I just burst into tears. And she was like, this interview is over. Your daughter's accepted. Every Jewish child has the right to a Jewish education. And I think I just learned something then. It's so much about leadership. Same zip code, same wealthy neighborhood, same school fees, same New York City basket of services. But when water's tainted at the source, water's tainted, and one leader can change an entire outcome.
Did you change this school for your older kids or not?
Yeah,
you did.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they all went to Chabad school.
No, I just went to Chabad preschool and I moved my kids to SAR in Riverdale, Salanta Academy of Riverdale, which had a complete different approach to inclusion. They made all the staff come and understand why it was important. Everybody was on the side of yes, this is what we do, which is all about leadership. So I just realized there was no point in forcing my son to stay in a school so I could win my war.
Right.
So,
wow, that's a touching story. I'm so glad it had an ending where now they're all in the school together.
Well, so now my kids are older, but we moved to Israel 8 years ago.
Right.
So a whole different challenge.
What was that like moving to Israel?
I say that moving to Israel was much harder than getting a diagnosis of a child with a disability. That one I had the clear hand of God, this meant to be. I was when I moved to Israel, I was oh. I was why am I doing all this? That's when the wine came in.
Sure.
It was God, give me coffee to deal with things I can, and wine to deal with the things I can't.
Yeah. We drank a lot of wine we got here too. I remember we were drinking a full glass of stuff. It was stressful.
In the beginning, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And then to try and make Aliyah with a child with a disability is double stressful.
Which community did you choose?
So we live in the German colony.
Oh, very close.
Yeah.
Why was it struggle to bring a disability child in with this child? What's the difference?
Because
when you service it,
it's a complete different system. In America, you have all the services, but you didn't have open-mindedness.
Right.
Here we had open-mindedness, but no services.
Okay.
So you're now trying to do, very few people do true inclusion. Like what I'm trying to do, where my daughter's not a chesed project, she's not sitting in the back of the class. She is part of the class learning a modified curriculum. And there are very few families who do it here because you don't get a basket of services. So as a result, you have to be have a kid who's higher functioning enough to go to regular education. Right. And parents who are hands-on, and parents who have flexible work hours. Sure. Because you've got to be schlep your kid to a million therapies, which in New York was all packaged at school and given by Department of Education in the school system. And you have to have the socioeconomic, there's everything has to come together. So there are very, very few kids who do true inclusion like what we're trying to do. So we're effectively pioneering a system. everybody say to me, we know one kid who also went through, and he's like, how old's the kid? 26. I'm like, okay, she's like 14, there's like 12 years gap since there was another kid who went through true inclusion.
Wow. And it works. It's working.
It's hard.
Those challenges.
It's hard for me because there's a lot of work that I have to, I am the CEO of an intervention team, and I don't speak Hebrew, and I'm not a therapist, but...
You don't speak Hebrew. That makes it very difficult.
Ask my son, who since age 12 has been on conference calls every night and speaking. So the language, and then I also think that for her, it's, she's now a teenager, she's 14. It's hard to be a girl. I've never met a woman who will tell you that they want to go back to being a teenage, like a 14-year-old girl. I've never interviewed always like, yeah, that was the best time in my life. Most people cringe at the thought. So to be a 14-year-old girl, be highly aware of your differences and to be able to accept them is very hard. So she struggles a lot in the social piece. It's very hard for her. She lives between two worlds. She knows she's got a challenge. She calls it the real people and the other people. And as much as we try and give her opportunity to be with kids with disabilities and kids not, she's very high functioning, so she's often more higher functioning than the kids with disabilities.
I know what that's like. I have a sister who's disabled, and again, when she was younger, she was very, very high functioning, but she's disabled, and she was much better off than the places that people want to send her to, these different, what do you call them? Institutions.
Yeah.
She was much higher functioning than that. They would just give her a broom to sweep. My father tried finding places, and there was no place for her. It's very difficult.
It's very, very hard. And I literally feel like I wake up every morning with my boxing gloves on. So, this is like I'm forever fighting, educating, trying to get people to see a different perspective. It's like never ending. And, little kids, little problems, bigger kids, bigger problems. So, it's different moving challenges all the time.
So your advocacy has expanded beyond your own daughter now and into, it sounds like, many communities.
So I really have this theory that what we're doing for inclusion, we live in a society that we think good is good enough, but it's not good enough because we now put in so much money into special needs and inclusion in inverted commas, because I'm not sure it's what I would call inclusion, but we pat ourselves on the back, like fantastic job, we're doing all this. But sometimes we're just still creating the other. We're not truly celebrating people with differences. We're not truly integrating them in society. We're not creating meaningful opportunities. So my next book that I'm writing is radical inclusion. I don't know what I'm going to call it, but it's basically the idea of radical inclusion and flipping the whole idea on its head from this chesed-based, nice to have model to actually now what's true inclusion.
So your
next real leadership.
Yeah, so your next book's basically about, disabilities and being included. That's kind of basic.
Right, it's like a deep dive.
This
was
more
inclusion. This is more life story and being, dealing with challenges. This could be relevant to university students, an entrepreneur mom. How do you balance it? A parent with a disability. This is a conversation with Jodi. That's going to be a deep dive in inclusion.
How can someone get this book to hear this story? Where do they find this book?
So in Israel, Stemansky has it. All the Stemanskys in the English-speaking section. You can also get it on Amazon, and it's an ebook and a print version on Amazon. And so,
if people want to have you on, because you obviously are a great speaker, how do they find you?
So Jodi's Voice is my website.
Okay.
When I found my voice, this is Jodi's Voice. So jodisvoice.com, Jodi's Voice on Instagram, Facebook. You can reach me on any of those mediums.
Did you ever think you'd become a public speaker? That was something in your dreams? I'm going to become a public speaker.
I think if you ask people, even I recently saw someone who did their MBA with me in university, and he was like, I never said a word. Didn't say a word. I don't think anybody, now my husband's like, can I get the other Jodi back? The quiet one.
He didn't know what he was getting into.
Yeah, no. Even my parents, the first time they saw me speak, nobody could believe it.
Yeah.
But I guess that's where the red wine comes in.
When you're doing the JIC, you're doing these events where people come to your house, open yourself up. That's obviously you're out there already.
But it's different when you have people coming to your house and you're talking to them one-on-one. I was never shy in that sense. I was always very good at people skills and talking to people. But to get up in public, there was you couldn't have paid me to do it before.
People were terrified.
It was like the most scary thing. In fact, I ran my organization with Steve Eisenberg, who I'm sure you might know, who was like Mr. Upper West Side and Mr. Kirov guy. And we would run events, and he would be like at the event. I was like always the person who was the engine, the connector. He'd be like, Jodi, say hi to everyone. Do you want to make announcements? And like my eyes would fill with tears. And I was like, that was the most traumatic thing I could have to do. Just make a 2-minute announcement.
Yeah. I teach a lot of my students about public speaking. I said, never turn down an opportunity to speak. And we always do that. We do anywhere we can speak. We tell a story about happened in Tel Aviv last week, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, recently we were in Tel Aviv and we had a seminar. We do seminars once or twice a month.
Yeah.
And so we did our first one in Tel Aviv and one person showed up. And we're
Welcome
like...
to Tel Aviv.
Yeah. Wow.
It was at a hotel. They had a lobby and had a stage, and they do events there at the hotel. It was like a hostel hotel, so the lobby was there, so people walking in and out. So,
yeah, incredible. There were people there just, having beers, probably getting ready for the America versus Iran soccer game, the World Cup. And then we have a stage set up for us. And I'm like, should we just teach the one guy who showed up, just give a one-on-one class? And coach said, no. And we don't turn down a speaking opportunity. So we got up, took the microphone, and I had to break the ice in the room and say, hi, you don't know this, but you're at a dating seminar.
That's like,
and at the end, we had 20 people paying attention to us, and it was...
They clapped. They clapped, and they told how, but the guy was like, I can't believe how much wisdom you guys are throwing at us. I have all these notes, and my wife loved it. It was really funny.
I feel like that was like the rock bottom moment where you can't fail, just go for it.
And you know what you also never know? That like one person might have been the whole reason. You could have spoken to 100 people and it's one person that you like really touched. So
Carlos
you never know.
Miami, that's what it was, right?
That was great.
But there were other people there too. There was people came in, they're sitting at the bar watching us. It was young people also. So it was really, it was
even the bartender.
The bartender loved it.
And you know what? It was like that chutzpah.
Yeah.
I talk about that chutzpah, just getting out there and breaking the mold. Because most people would have been like, well, I'm not sure if I should.
Well, I might have been like that until I had this concept that you never turn an opportunity because you don't know what's going to happen. It's also for us, it's practice. It's just because, by the way, you speak with microphones sometimes, right?
Yeah.
It's hard. If you remember the first time,
to keep
goodness,
it.
the first time you did it, it's uncomfortable because you have to hold the thing. And now we had a seminar last week here in Jerusalem. And I was really comfortable and you were really comfortable.
Yeah.
Much better.
The first time I wasn't
nervous. And again,
nervous.
if you're not, have a glass of red wine and you'll be much more comfortable.
That is the best medicine. I have to start.
Yeah. I'm telling you, red wine is like a good
I'm drinking
thing.
red wine tonight.
No more Moscato.
Yeah.
We can't talk about all this. I'm dying to hear. You're pushing all the limits. You're breaking all these barriers. But one of the biggest barriers is the ability that you have shown with your family to travel. With your daughter, with everything else going on, you've been to how many countries has she been in?
She's been to, I think, 55 countries. And she's even been to countries like India 3 times. She's been to Ethiopia, Myanmar. I mean, my kids have been off the beaten track, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Zambia, really not just going to Europe on occasion.
And I'm sure you're doing activities in each one. You're all about the experiences. What are some of the experiences and how has she grown from them?
So I think all my kids grow from traveling. I think they learn a lot more than they ever could learn in school.
Right.
But, for her, she learns visually very well. So I always think of India, where there's this overwhelming amount of religions. And if she would learn about Hindu and Muslim and Christian and Sikh and in a book, I don't know what she'd get out of it, even if you watch a video. But when you were there and you see the people in real life, she absorbs it. But my kids learn a lesson all the time. Like I say to my kids, just because you were born on the side of the tracks you were, to the parent you were, and the year you were, is a privilege, and that's responsibility. With that privilege comes responsibility. And part of our process when we travel is educating my kids about what it means to be a Jew. I think they learn so many lessons, what it means to be tikkun olam, a responsible Jew. Even just the lesson of sitting in a breakfast room where you can eat your banana for breakfast and they're smelling fresh cookies or something. Mm-hmm. I always remember they're Jewish when we travel with a pop-up sukkah and you're living in the middle of nowhere and you've got to pop up the sukkah. They're constantly being reminded that they're Jewish and they're constantly being reminded why it's important to be Jewish. So I think travel teaches, and then I think your kids have such it's amazing family time, because especially when you have a busy life like we do, and there's always people around, and then you go traveling, and this is family time. But I mean, my kids can talk about like politics, and they can talk about things that most people never even learn about. At age 12, my middle daughter would tell you like the difference between Spanish and Portuguese Inquisition, or FARC in Colombia, or, you know, my
Because
kids
they've been there.
and like they understand. And we don't go to the zoo. We don't go to theme parks. We don't go to the water park. We go and we understand. And I think even for Kayla, I made the decision, I'm not going to stop traveling. And she was 4 weeks old when she went on her first international trip.
Wow.
And we've always just schlepped her along, treat her. And I do a lot of mediating, a lot of, you know, my other kids might have picked up more from the environment. I'm constantly mediating, explaining. But my kids learn and they grow, and she's no different. Why, you know, so maybe she doesn't learn at the same intellectual level she does, but she absolutely understands and grows from it.
So what's on tap coming up? I want to hear some countries you're going to next year, or things you're thinking of going to,
Well,
places.
I did have a plan to go to Russia, but that one,
Yikes.
there was always on my day. We are hoping to go to Nepal for Pesach.
I think that might be the biggest Seder in the world.
Yes, it is.
The Nepal Chabad might be the big one. What,
well,
not Sri
between
Lanka,
that and,
Sri Lanka
and
or
Thailand.
is a big one.
They're all
Yeah.
big.
So
Wow.
we're going. It was the original big Chabad like Seder. So we just booked the tickets today to go to Nepal this morning for Pesach. I'm hoping to go to Vietnam as well, and I'm starting to feel the same anxiety my daughter does. The one she's in like Mechina now. She's going into the army. She's like, Emma, where am I going to be able to go that I haven't been to? Because, you know, not all countries are
Yeah.
safe for
No.
Jews, and
Right.
not all countries are like, for whatever reason, you don't get to travel everywhere.
So do you plan to go to base camp? I always think it'd be really cool. I have no interest in obviously climbing Mount Everest. By the way, do you realize Mount Everest, 14% of the people that climb die?
I've seen
That's
those.
really high. I was
Okay.
shocked.
Okay.
14%.
I can assure you I'm not climbing that high.
No, but
If I
you
could go to
base camp 16,000 feet,
So-
I think, or 19,000. I don't
Maybe.
remember.
I mean, I
Easy.
have to be realistic with Kayla, and she's pretty amazing. I don't know how, but we definitely plan. I've just started looking into it. I first booked the frequent flyer tickets. We see where we can get the frequent flyer tickets, and then we decide.
What's
a
your
good
airline?
way.
What's your airline? What airline do you like?
United.
United, yeah.
Because it's partner. My husband travels a lot in United, so
Great.
so I'm always looking to travel, and I take a lot of groups. I just took a group to India for the JRC.
Do you go to Dubai also?
Yeah,
Yeah.
took a group to Dubai and India. So
Do you plan the trips?
I work with partners, like we take heritage trips, and I work with like J Roots or Justify.
Justify, great.
But I think the idea is when people are out of their comfort zones, that's when you can get them to move, which is the whole philosophy of
Yeah.
like Justify. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it's an amazing experience. So we just came back in September from India with a group.
Wow. That's so cool. Finally, I have to ask this. I told you I was going to ask this, and I need to, is what kind of tips do you have as a Baal Tshuva? One of the biggest things that I've experienced around my friends and myself is the fear of now I'm not going to be able to travel anymore because of kosher and because of other limitations being near a synagogue, Shabbat. What kind of tips do you have to make that work? It sounds like you've really figured it out.
Okay. No expectations. I repeat. No expectations. I repeat. No expectations. People who go traveling and thinking they're going to eat, like you just have to reprioritize. Like, you know, thank God we live in a world that plenty of prepackaged products you can take, from peanut butter to there's like these Tetra packs of like Indian and Asian food that comes long life packs of food. There's all the, you know, what do they call them? The ones where you add water to the noodles. You see
Yes.
these Israelis
Ramen
everywhere.
noodles, ramen
Like they
noodles.
live in them everywhere. There's
Yeah.
And we always try plan like our trips if we're going to be like away for Pesach or something where there's Chabad houses, because there's certain times of year that's like harder to try. You know, most countries say like have a local bread that you can eat. But if you take out bread out of the equation, then you're like really hungry. So we try and plan like to be where there's a Chabad house. And thank God Chabad is everywhere these days. Just India alone has 16 Chabad houses.
Really?
So
It's
you can
amazing.
plan your trip. I think that my kids know when we're going, we're not going to eat. We're going to eat a lot of boiled eggs, bananas, avocado. We're not going for gourmet meals. We're going for the experience. So I definitely say low expectations, but a toasted sandwich machine You know, there's like little
yeah.
triangle machines.
Yeah, you pack one?
You have no idea what you can make in those. I
Really?
have made everything. I take like ready-made cake mixes, you put them in there. You make omelets in there. You make sandwiches in there. You can make everything. You're amazing what you can make. That is like
Wow.
like we cook everything on that. I've even made like matzo balls. Like I made like we take a single burner with the pot. I've like made matzo balls. The like recipe says put this in, put a lid on, do whatever, and it tastes fine. When your kids are hungry, they'll eat.
And a little sandwich maker.
A lot of things. It's unbelievable what we live on, and I have a lot more details that I can share, but I just think that
I feel like there needs to be a cookbook now.
I think that most people make the mistake of planning their trips around food rather than the experience, and you'll be limited if
Is
you're
that
going to
a
make
book
it.
yet? A travel kosher cookbook.
If it's not, it needs to exist.
It's very
really
simple.
Good.
It's
It is,
very
but
simple.
You think it's simple, but it really takes a lot of planning. I mean, before I was kosher, I was traveling. I was sitting in first class, and I was traveling next to an observant guy. And I asked him, "How do you eat on the road?" He goes, "I take a can of tuna fish and crackers." I'm like, "I'm never doing that."
Yeah, right?
And then, now,
Yeah,
of course,
dude.
I do it sometimes.
Protein bars,
Protein
biltong,
bar,
South
but-
African
But I've learned.
biltong. It's
you
a good
know,
one.
I've
Fried
learned that
meat.
One time I had to go to Tampa and there was no grocery food. I brought a little thing, about a pan, and I went grocery shopping and I made my own food in the hotel room.
Yeah,
But you can do it.
We do it all the time. I mean, Israelis actually, even though they're like not necessarily religious, do this in hotel rooms all the time because they're saving money. Like
Right.
Israelis are famous for like cooking in hotel rooms.
Yeah.
And here's signs when you go places: do not cook in the room. You know, they're like talking to the Israelis.
Yes.
So yeah,
I can definitely relate to traveling for food. I remember like growing up, my dad would always say, "Oh, I feel like our whole vacation is about where we're eating our next meal." And then now that I go back home and I'm with my family and I can't eat with them at the restaurants, it changes the whole dynamic.
And so we just don't let I mean there is no secret to like secret formula. Like we always take meat and cheese with us as long as you can. Some countries have a limitation. We'll try barbecue. You can often buy disposable barbecues.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
amazing. Like you do figure it out, but there are times, and I was telling you, like my Pesach vacation, that was such a disaster. And we like really were hungry over Pesach. You can have these disasters. My daughter forgot to take the cooler bag. She was coming a few days
Oh,
after
no.
us
Oh, no.
with all our Pesach food in, which had like the Pesach cold cuts, yogurts. Because, usually you can buy some things. Like every country, for the most part, has like a chabad house, and
Yeah.
they'll have like the plain yogurt, the local bread. Well, Pesach, there's
can't have bread.
There's none of this.
Right.
And she forgot the bag. And then the rabbi in Slovenia was waiting for his delivery of shmura matzah, and he never got his delivery. So he
Oh,
was like
no.
rationing matzah. And then we started eating our matzah that we took and our, jam and whatever we were taking. And we got to the next hotel and I was like, "Where's the bag?" And my daughter realized we'd left it in the closet. We were like literally rationing. We were each allowed half a piece of matzah per meal.
Whoa.
It was a little insane how little food. And then we finally got to an Airbnb and we walk in there and we put like all the plastic down. We take those disposable plastic covers to cover the counters. And we take our pot and we
Kashrut.
crush it. And then we realize we're just about to, and it's one of those induction stovetops, which means you can only use an induction pot to get it to work, which of course they have
Magnets.
in the place. But now our pot's not an induction pot. So like now we finally think we're going to cook.
Oh my goodness.
And it was like a half an hour till like a 2-day chag. And we run out to try see if, you try explain to people who don't speak English that you're looking for an induction pot.
It's in Croatia.
This was in Slovenia.
Slovenia.
And then finally it was just insane. And my husband came home and he like bought an electric frying pan and he was like, "Okay, we'll at least cook as much as we can." So we put it on and we put the timer, everything, we switch it off. And like when the connection's a little bit loose
Yeah.
and you have to keep wiggling it.
Oh, no.
So of course when Shabbat was in, there was nothing, Yontif was in because we thought we'd cook on Yontif for.
Right.
And we had raw potatoes, raw fish, raw sweet potato. We couldn't cook anything. It was like a little.
What'd you eat?
Not much. All the junk food we had. My kids were so hungry. It was really insane, and that was like my nightmare scenario. Because usually we're pretty good at. We usually come home with food that we've taken because we usually so. This was our one time where everything that could go wrong did. But you know what? I always say, like at the end of the day, It's war stories. My kids will tell everybody the story. They don't remember how hungry they were and how awful the last 2 days of Pesach were. They remember how beautiful Slovenia was, how adventurous, how the beautiful thing. Like that's what the narrative becomes. Nobody ever like sits there and goes, oh, the food. So,
wow. All right, well, I have to ask you our final question, and obviously there's so much more to talk about. We didn't even get into the coaching, but do you have a key to clarity you'd like to let our audience know about?
I think that you have to know what your personal why is. And I think that so many people walk around trying to be their mother's why, Facebook's why. They don't know. Everybody knows what they do and how they do it, but they don't know why they do it. And like as Simon Sinek, the famous like marketing consultant, said, you've got to know what your why is. And when you understand that, and, you know, we learn this in Torah all the time about like understanding what our purpose is. But a lot of people don't come from a Torah perspective in a Torah world. So you have to truly understand what's your why. Why am I getting out of bed? Why? What is my purpose in this world? And I think when you do that, you're excited. You know, you've never seen someone get out of bed and go, like, I'm not going to eat today. Just like had enough of eating. Like people eat because it feeds them. When you know what your why is, it feeds you, it gives you passion, it gives you motivation. You're excited. You're ready for the challenge. Even when the walls are high, you want to scale them. But you have to know what your why is. And I think we have a whole entire crisis of younger people who just exist and they don't actually know what their why is. They do not know. When you hear about the kids who can't get out of bed and they play video games and they don't know what their why is. They don't know what their purpose is. And it's not just to be pampered by mommy and daddy. And I think people, you know, and I think this is something, and it's not something that people find their why, like, because we have a 2-minute conversation. We really have to help people explore who are they, what are they looking for, and what is their why. And we spend so much time living everybody else's world.
Wow. I love that. Is such a key to clarity. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so
I
much.
learned
Thank
so
you,
much from
guys.
this. And thank you for watching this episode of the Living in Clarity podcast.
See you next time. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Living in Clarity podcast.
If you enjoy what you just heard, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment with any suggestions for future episodes.
We'll see you next time.